Hello, my loyal royal friends and subjects. I have another tale to read. Since it's still presumably the month of my birthday, I thought I would focus on my favorite fairy tale, which is Beauty and the Beast. However, I'm not ready to read that yet. For one thing, it's one of the bigger, more well-known fairy tales that has been turned into a Disney movie, and I usually like to save those for special occasions. Otherwise, I like to draw attention to lesser-known fairy tales. Besides, in regards to Beauty and the Beast, I haven't figured out if I'm going to read the original novella version by Villeneuve or the shortened version by Beaumont. Either way, it still doesn't feel like the right time to read Beauty and the Beast. One day, though. Despite this, I have the next best thing, a story called East of the Sun and West of the Moon. This tale was collected by Peter Christian Asbjornsen and Jørgen Moe, two names that I have mentioned in the past and continuously butcher with my horrendous mispronunciation. It's never going to get better. I like to say that this story is the Norwegian cousin of Beauty and the Beast. The reason why I call it that is, well, first of all, this tale is from Norway, and second, both Beauty and the Beast and East of the Sun and West of the Moon fall under the Arne Thompson Uther tale type 425, The Search for the Lost Husband. This tale type is split into several sub-tale types. For example, Beauty and the Beast falls under ATU 425C, which simply goes by Beauty and the Beast. I know, very original. This tale type does not necessarily line up with the other subtypes of ATU 425, in which the husband is lost and the wife must go in search of him. As many of us may know, Beauty and the Beast ends when the beast turns into a prince. He never gets taken away from her, and therefore Beauty does not need to go on a journey to find him, like her counterparts do in other ATU 425 subtypes. This is exactly what happens in East of the Sun and West of the Moon, which falls under ATU 425A, which is called The Animal as Bridegroom. There's also ATU 425B, Son of the Witch, in which the heroine must complete tasks for her mother-in-law in order to be reunited with her husband. The most famous example of ATU 425B is the myth of Cupid and Psyche, and as far as we know, this might be the oldest literary version of the whole ATU 425 tale type. It might also be the oldest oral version as well, from the Greco-Roman world. There's probably an even older version, but I'll talk more about that whenever I read Cupid and Psyche, which I definitely want to save for an episode. There are two other subtypes of Search for the Lost Husband. There are ATUs 425D, The Vanished Husband, and 425E, Enchanted Husband Sings Lullaby. But I guess they're not as popular as the other 425 types. I certainly never heard of them before researching for today's story. With all of that history of the Search for the Lost Husband tales, let's go ahead and start reading today's story, which I hope you'll enjoy. This is East of the Sun and West of the Moon, by Asbjornsen and Moe. Once upon a time, there was a poor husbandman who had many children and little to give them in the way either of food or clothing. They were all pretty, but the prettiest of all was the youngest daughter, who was so beautiful that there were no bounds to her beauty. I've heard that one before. Also, why is it always the youngest siblings who are the prettiest? I say that as an older sibling. So once, it was late on a Thursday evening in autumn, and wild weather outside, terribly dark, and raining so heavily and blowing so hard that the walls of the cottage shook again. They were all sitting together by the fireside, each of them busy with something or other, when suddenly someone rapped 3 times against the window pane. The man went out to see what could be the matter, and when he got out, there stood a great big white bear. "Good evening to you," said the white bear. "Good evening," said the man. "Will you give me your youngest daughter?" said the white bear. "If you will, you shall be as rich as you are now poor." Truly, the man would have had no objection to be rich, but he thought to himself, "I must first ask my daughter about this." So he went in and told them that there was a great white bear outside who had faithfully promised to make them all rich if he might but have the youngest daughter. She said no and would not hear of it. So the man went out again and settled with the white bear that he should come again next Thursday evening and get her answer. She already gave it, Dad. Then the man persuaded her and talked so much to her about the wealth that they would have and what a good thing it would be for herself, and that at last she made up her mind to go, and washed and mended all her rags, made herself as smart as she could, and held herself in readiness to set out. Little enough had she to take away with her. Oh yeah, this is basically an arranged marriage. I know I haven't read Beauty and the Beast on this podcast, but let's face it, a majority of you have at least seen the movie. Therefore, you know what happens, so I can talk about it without spoiling it, if that's possible. Anyway, at least Beauty's father was against giving his daughter to the Beast. It was Beauty herself who was willing to go to save her father's life. Here, it feels like our heroine was manipulated by her father, who doesn't seem to consider the idea that this bear could potentially eat her, but oh well. Next Thursday evening, the white bear came to fetch her. She seated herself on his back with her bundle, and thus they departed. When they had gone a great part of the way, the white bear said, "Are you afraid?" "No, that I am not," said she. "Keep tight hold of my fur, and then there is no danger," said he. "Well, at least she has courage, like Beauty." And thus she rode far, far away until they came to a great mountain. Then the white bear knocked on it, and a door opened, and they went into a castle where there were many brilliantly lighted rooms, which shone with gold and silver. Likewise a large hall in which there was a well-spread table, and it was so magnificent that it would be hard to make anyone understand how splendid it was. The white bear gave her a silver bell, and told her that when she needed anything, she had but to ring this bell, and what she wanted would appear. So after she had eaten, and night was drawing near, she grew sleepy after her journey, and thought she would like to go to bed. She rang the bell, and scarcely had she touched it before she found herself in a chamber where a bed stood ready made for her, which was as pretty as anyone could wish to sleep in. It had pillows of silk, and curtains of silk fringed with gold, and everything that was in the room was of gold or silver. But when she had lain down and put out the light, a man came and lay down beside her. And behold, it was the white bear, who cast off the form of a beast during the night. She never saw him, however, for he always came after she had put out her light, and went away before daylight appeared. Please tell me they at least talked about the sleeping arrangements prior. Look, I know this whole arrangement is basically a marriage, but still. So all went well and happily for a time, but then she began to be very sad and sorrowful, for all day long she had to go about alone, and she did so wish to go home to her father and mother and brothers and sisters. Then the white bear asked what it was that she wanted, and she told him that it was so dull there in the mountain, and that she had to go about all alone, and that in her parents' house at home there were all her brothers and sisters, and it was because she could not go to them that she was so sorrowful. "There might be a cure for that," said the white bear, "if you would but promise me never to talk with your mother alone, but only when the others are there too, for she will take hold of your hand," he said, "and will want to lead you into a room to talk with you alone, but that you must by no means do, or you will bring great misery on both of us." So one Sunday the white bear came and said that they could now set out to see her father and mother, and they journeyed thither, she sitting on his back, and they went a long, long way, and it took a long, long time. But at last they came to a large white farmhouse, and her brothers and sisters were running about outside it, playing, and it was so pretty that it was a pleasure to look at it. "Your parents dwell here now," said the white bear, "but do not forget what I said to you, or you will do much harm both to yourself and me." "No, indeed," said she, "I shall never forget." And as soon as she was at home, the white bear turned round and went back again. There were such rejoicings when she went in to her parents that it seemed as if they would never come to an end. Everyone thought that he could never be sufficiently grateful to her for all she had done for them all. Now they had everything that they wanted, and everything was as good as it could be. They all asked her how she was getting on where she was. All was well with her too, she said, and she had everything that she could want. What other answers she gave I cannot say, but I am pretty sure that they did not learn much from her. But in the afternoon, after they had dined at midday, all happened just as the white bear had said. Her mother wanted to talk with her alone in her own chamber, but she remembered what the white bear had said and would on no account go. "What we have to say can be said at any time," she answered. But somehow or other her mother at last persuaded her, and she was forced to tell the whole story. So she told how every night a man came and lay down beside her when the lights were all put out, and how she never saw him because he always went away before it grew light in the morning, and how she continually went about in sadness, thinking how happy she would be if she could but see him, and how all day long she had to go about alone, and it was so dull and solitary. "Oh!" cried the mother in horror. "You are very likely sleeping with a troll, but I will teach you a way to see him. You shall have a bit of one of my candles, which you can take away with you hidden in your breast. Look at him with that when he is asleep, but take care not to let any tallow drop upon him." First of all, how does Mother Dearest here know whether her daughter's bear bridegroom is a troll? Trolls are very common fairy tale creatures that appear in most Scandinavian fairy tales and folklore. Either way, that's a rather quick assumption to make. Also, did our heroine here even bother to ask the bear? In other versions of this story, the situation is a little more dire because she has children with her bear husband. Yet each time a child is born, the villain, the helpers, or the husband himself, under his curse, will snatch the child away. The heroine usually has up to 3 children, so this turns into the typical pattern of 3 that you see in most fairy tales. And each time it happens, her husband tells her that she has to trust him. Although, considering the circumstances, I don't really blame the heroine for getting suspicious and seeking advice from her mother, at least in those versions of the story. Let's see how that advice fares with her in this version of the story. So she took the candle and hid it in her breast, and when evening drew near, the white bear came to fetch her away. When they had gone some distance on their way, the white bear asked her if everything had not happened just as he had foretold, and she could not but own that it had. "Then if you have done what your mother wished," said he, "you have brought great misery on both of us." "No," she said, "I have not done anything at all." "Well, at least Beauty is honest." So when she had reached home and had gone to bed, it was just the same as it had been before, and a man came and lay down beside her, and late at night, when she could hear that he was sleeping, she got up and kindled a light, lit her candle, let her light shine on him, and saw him. And he was the handsomest prince that eyes had ever beheld. And she loved him so much that it seemed to her that she must die if she did not kiss him that very moment. "Well, if he's hot, I guess this changes things." So she did kiss him, but while she was doing it, she let 3 drops of hot tallow fall upon his shirt, and he awoke. "What have you done now?" said he. "You have brought misery on both of us. If you had but held out for the space of 1 year, I should have been free. I have a stepmother who has bewitched me, so that I am a white bear by day and a man by night. But now all is at an end between you and me, and I must leave you and go to her. She lives in a castle which lies east of the sun and west of the moon. Roll credits. And there too is a princess with a nose which is 3 ells long, and she now is the one whom I must marry." Thanks to Heidi Ann Heiner's annotations on this story, I found out that an ell is an outdated measure of cloth. Although the measure of an ell differs by country, in England, her nose would be 135 inches long. By the way, why is it that when a guy kisses a sleeping woman in a fairy tale, everything turns out fine, but when a woman kisses a sleeping man, she sets off a problem? She wept and lamented, but all in vain, for go he must. Then she asked him if she could not go with him, but no, that could not be. "Can you tell me the way, then? And I will seek you. That I may surely be allowed to do."
"Yes, you may do that," said he, "but there is no way thither. It lies east of the sun and west of the moon, and never would you find your way there."
When she awoke in the morning, both the prince and the castle were gone, and she was lying on a small green patch in the midst of a dark, thick wood. By her side lay the self-same bundle of rags which she had brought with her from her own home. So when she had rubbed the sleep out of her eyes, and wept till she was weary, she set out on her way, and thus she walked for many and many a long day, until at last she came to a green mountain. By the way, I appreciate her for having a good cry about it before picking herself up and actually doing something. Look, there's nothing wrong with crying, just as long as you pick yourself up after you're done. Outside it, an old woman was sitting, playing with a golden apple. The girl asked her if she knew the way to the prince who lived with his stepmother in the castle which lay east of the sun and west of the moon, and who was to marry a princess with a nose which was 3 ells long.
"How do you happen to know about him?" inquired the old woman. "Maybe you are she who ought to have had him."
"Yes, indeed I am," she said.
"So is it you, then?"
said the old woman.
"I know nothing about him, but that he dwells in a castle which is east of the sun and west of the moon. You will be a long time in getting to it, if ever you get to it at all. But you shall have the loan of my horse, and then you can ride on it to an old woman who is a neighbor of mine. Perhaps she can tell you about him. When you have got there, you must just strike the horse beneath the left ear and bid it go home again. But you may take the golden apple with you."
I might have mentioned this when I read stories about the beautiful and ugly sisters, but golden apples appear a lot in folklore. In Greek and Norse mythology, they are a special fruit associated with the gods, usually giving them eternal youth and beauty. In fairy tales, golden apples seem to be used more for decoration, especially among royals, rather than for consumption, as normal apples are used for. I could probably make a whole video about golden apples because, I'm not gonna lie, I've been a little obsessed with this mysterious fruit that pops up everywhere in mythology and fairy tales. I guess maybe we can look forward to that being a video? Only time will tell, though. So the girl seated herself on the horse and rode for a long, long way, and at last she came to the mountain where an aged woman was sitting outside with a gold carding comb. The girl asked her if she knew the way to the castle which lay east of the sun and west of the moon, but she said what the first old woman had said.
"I know nothing about it, but that it is east of the sun and west of the moon, and that you will be a long time in getting to it, if ever you get there at all. But you shall have the loan of my horse to an old woman who lives the nearest to me. Perhaps she may know where the castle is, and when you have got to her, you may just strike the horse beneath the left ear and bid it go home again."
Then she gave her the gold carding comb, for it might, perhaps, be of use to her, she said. So the girl seated herself on the horse and rode a wearisome long way onward again, and after a very long time she came to a great mountain where an aged woman was sitting, spinning at a golden spinning wheel. Just a few episodes ago, we read the story of Rumpelstiltskin, a fairy tale that had a huge deal with spinning and gold. If I haven't mentioned this before, spinning wheels actually appear a lot in fairy tales, not only with Rumpelstiltskin, but also with Sleeping Beauty. Spinning is also connected to the fates and the Norns of Greek and Norse mythology. Now that I think about it, I swear this wasn't in my notes, but now that I think about it, I kind of wonder if those 3 old women are supposed to be the fates. I don't know. This part was completely improvised and not part of my original script. Gotta love it when I randomly remember something that I probably should have added to my notes a long time ago. Better late than never, I guess. Of this woman, too, she inquired if she knew the way to the prince, and where to find the castle which lay east of the sun and west of the moon. But it was only the same thing once again. What? The same thing the third time? I thought you were supposed to be the third one who actually helps the girl.
Maybe it was you who should have had the prince, said the old woman.
Yes, indeed, I should have been the one, said the girl. But this old crone knew the way no better than the others. It was east of the sun and west of the moon, she knew that.
And you will be a long time in getting to it, if ever you get to it at all, she said. But you may have the load of my horse, and I think you had better ride to the east wind and ask him. Perhaps he may know where the castle is, and will blow you thither. But when you have got to him, you must just strike the horse beneath the left ear, and he will come home again.
And then she gave her the golden spinning wheel, saying,
Perhaps you may find that you have a use for it.
The girl had to ride for a great many days, and for a long and wearisome time before she got there. But at last she did arrive, and then she asked the east wind if he could tell her the way to the prince who dwelt east of the sun and west of the moon.
Well,
said the east wind,
I have heard tell of the prince and of his castle, but I do not know the way to it, for I have never blown so far. But if you like, I will go with you to my brother the west wind. He may know that, for he is much stronger than I am. You may sit on my back, and then I can carry you there.
So she seated herself on his back, and they did go so swiftly. When they got there, the east wind went in and said that the girl whom he had brought was the one who ought to have had the prince up at the castle which lay east of the sun and west of the moon, and that now she was traveling about to find him again. So he had come there with her, and would like to hear if the west wind knew whereabout the castle was. No, said the west wind. So far as that have I never blown, but if you like I will go with you to the south wind, for he is much stronger than either of us, and he has roamed far and wide, and perhaps he can tell you what you want to know. You may seat yourself on my back, and then I will carry you to him. So she did this, and journeyed to the south wind, neither was she very long on the way. When they had got there, the west wind asked him if he could tell her the way to the castle that lay east of the sun and west of the moon, for she was the girl who ought to marry the prince who lived there.
Oh, indeed, said the south wind. Is that she? Well, said he, I have wandered about a great deal in my time, and in all kinds of places, but I have never blown so far as that. If you like, however, I will go with you to my brother, the north wind. He is the oldest and strongest of all of us, and if he does not know where it is, no one in the whole world will be able to tell you. You may sit upon my back, and then I will carry you there.
So she seated herself on his back, and off he went from his house in great haste, and they were not long on the way. When they came near the north wind's dwelling, he was so wild and frantic that they felt cold gusts a long while before they got there.
What do you want?
He roared out from afar, and they froze as they heard. Said the south wind, It is I, and this is she who should have had the prince who lives in the castle which lies east of the sun and west of the moon, and now she wishes to ask you if you have ever been there, and can tell her the way, for she would gladly find him again.
Yes, said the north wind, I know where it is. I once blew an aspen leaf there, but I was so tired that for many days afterward I was not able to blow at all. However, if you really are anxious to go there, and are not afraid to go with me, I will take you on my back, and try if I can blow you there.
Get there I must, said she, and if there is any way of going I will, and I have no fear, no matter how fast you go.
Very well then, said the north wind. But you must sleep here tonight, for if we are ever to get there, we must have the day before us.
The north wind woke her betimes next morning, and puffed himself up and made himself so big and so strong that it was frightful to see him. And away they went, high up through the air, as if they would not stop until they had reached the very end of the world. Down below there was such a storm. It blew down woods and houses, and when they were above the sea, the ships were wrecked by hundreds.
Did they just murder a bunch of people? Please tell me no. They're on a mission to save someone.
And thus they tore on, and a long time went by, and then yet more time passed, and still they were above the sea, and the north wind grew tired, and more tired, and at last so utterly weary that he was scarcely able to blow any longer, and he sank and sank, lower and lower, until at last he went so low that the waves dashed against the heels of the poor girl he was carrying.
"Art thou afraid?"
said the north wind. "I have no fear," said she, and it was true. But they were not very, very far from land, and there was just enough strength left in the north wind to enable him to throw her onto the shore, immediately under the windows of a castle which lay east of the sun and west of the moon. But then he was so weary and worn out that he was forced to rest for several days before he could go to his own home again. In the case of Psyche, she got a ride from Zephyr the west wind to the palace of her husband. I find that interesting since, as I mentioned before, Cupid and Psyche is the first literary version of the Search for the Lost Husband tale type. Anyway, our heroine found the place she was looking for. Now let's see how she saves her prince. I love saying that. It's nice to see a fairy tale in which the princess saves the prince. But honestly, I don't mind if the prince saves the princess. As long as they both work together, then that's all that matters to me. Next morning she sat down beneath the walls of the castle to play with the golden apple, and the first person she saw was the maiden with the long nose, who was to have the prince.
"How much do you want for that gold apple of yours, girl?" said she, opening the window.
"It can't be bought either for gold or money," answered the girl.
"If it cannot be bought either for gold or money, what will buy it? You may say what you please,"
said the princess. "Well, if I may go to the prince who is here, and be with him tonight, you shall have it," said the girl who had come with the north wind.
"You may do that,"
said the princess, for she had made up her mind what she would do. So the princess got the golden apple, but when the girl went up to the prince's apartment that night, he was asleep, for the princess had so contrived it. The poor girl called to him and shook him, and between whiles she wept, but she could not wake him. In the morning, as soon as day dawned, in came the princess with the long nose, and drove her out again. In the daytime she sat down once more beneath the windows of the castle, and began to card with her golden carding comb, and then all happened as it had happened before. The princess asked her what she wanted for it, and she replied that it was not for sale, either for gold or money, but that if she could get leave to go to the prince and be with him during the night, she should have it. But when she went up to the prince's room, he was again asleep, and let her call him or shake him or weep as she would, he still slept on, and she could not put any life in him. When daylight came in the morning, the princess with the long nose came to, and once more drove her away. When day had quite come, the girl seated herself under the castle windows to spin with her golden spinning wheel, and the princess with the long nose wanted to have that also. So she opened the window and asked what she would take for it. The girl said what she had said on each of the former occasions, that it was not for sale either for gold or for money, but if she could get leave to go to the prince who lived there and be with him during the night, she should have it.
"Yes," said the princess, "I will gladly consent to that."
I just spat on my pop filter. But in that place there were some Christian folk who had been carried off, and they had been sitting in the chamber which was next to that of the prince, and had heard how a woman had been in there who had wept and called on him 2 nights running, and they told the prince of this. So that evening, when the princess came once more with her sleeping drink, he pretended to drink, but threw it away behind him, for he suspected that it was a sleeping drink. So when the girl went into the prince's room, this time he was awake, and she had to tell him how she had come there. "You have come just in time," said the prince, "for I should have been married tomorrow, but I will not have the long-nosed princess, and you alone can save me." In many versions of this story, the prince is under a spell that makes him forget all about his wife or girlfriend or whatever she is to him in this relationship. Thankfully, she breaks the spell, especially if she shows him her half of their wedding ring. Just thought I'd point that out. That's literally another thing that I just happened to remember while recording this and did not have in my notes previously. What kind of research am I doing? I will say that I want to see what my bride can do, and bid her wash the shirt which has the 3 drops of tallow on it. This she will consent to do, for she does not know that it was you who let them fall on it. But no one can wash them out but one born of Christian folk. It cannot be done by one of a pack of trolls. And then I will say that no one shall ever be my bride but the woman who can do this, and I know that you can." There was great joy and gladness between them all that night, but the next day, when the wedding was to take place, the prince said, "I must see what my bride can do." "That you may," said the stepmother, who finally speaks her lines in this entire story. "I have a fine shirt which I want to wear as my wedding shirt. But 3 drops of tallow have got upon it which I want to have washed off, and I have vowed to marry no one but the woman who is able to do it. If she cannot do that, she is not worth having." I do not appreciate this obviously outdated test to determine whether a bride is worthy of a man simply based on her domestic skills. Granted, I do understand that this was a different culture, but at the same time, this also feels a little anticlimactic. You're telling me that the final battle is doing laundry? Boring. Well, that was a very small matter, they thought, and agreed to do it. The princess with the long nose began to wash as well as she could, but the more she washed and rubbed, the larger the spots grew. "Ah, you can't wash at all," said the old troll hag, who was her mother. "Give it to me." But she too had not had the shirt very long in her hands before it looked worse still, and the more she washed it and rubbed it, the larger and blacker grew the spots. So the other trolls had to come and wash, but the more they did, the blacker and uglier grew the shirt, until at length it was as black as if it had been up the chimney. "Oh," cried the prince, "not one of you is good for anything at all. There's a beggar girl sitting outside the window, and I'll be bound that she can wash better than any of you. Come in, you, girl, there," he cried. So she came in. "Can you wash this shirt clean?" he cried. "Oh, I don't know," she said, "but I will try." And no sooner had she taken the shirt and dipped it in the water than it was white as driven snow, and even whiter than that. "I will marry you," said the prince. Then the old troll hag flew into such a rage that she burst, and the princess with the long nose and all the little trolls must have burst too, for they have never been heard since. The prince and his bride set free all the Christian folk who were imprisoned there, and took away with them all the gold and silver that they could carry, and moved far away from the castle which lay east of the sun and west of the moon. With that, our tale comes to an end. As you can see, the trolls in this story are painted as evil, kidnapping and imprisoning Christians, who in this story are painted as the exact opposite. This is further demonstrated when they all try to clean the prince's shirt, yet instead end up making it dirtier, until our leading lady, who is herself Christian, manages to complete this task. Even though trolls can be portrayed as sinister and maybe even devil-like, there are other stories in which they are more benevolent and helpful to the hero. Think Frozen, if you will. This just goes to show that the Fae folk are neither wholly good nor evil, but a mix of the two, almost making them a bit unpredictable with their behavior. As for our leading lady, she finally found the prince that she had lost in the first place. One thing that I love about this story is that it is the princess who saves the prince. Yet I think what I love most about this story is how far this woman was willing to travel to win back the man she loves. Now that might not be the best wording, and I can completely see a different perspective of this story. That it's about a foolish girl who got too curious, went against her boyfriend's wishes, and had to go through all this trouble and complete a domestic task in order to earn him back. Yet there is something that I think our heroine learned in this story. Love requires trust between partners, and without it, the relationship is doomed to fail or end up toxic. Our heroine had promised the white bear that she would not follow her mother's advice, and ended up breaking that promise. After hurting the man she loves, she must go on a big journey to not only save him, but also to earn back his trust, which is never easy for anyone to earn back, once broken. It's a similar situation with other heroines of ATU 425. Both Beauty and Psyche break a promise to their beastly love interests, and it nearly costs them dearly. While I'm still not a big fan of the anticlimactic bride test at the end, I will forever admire the courage and determination presented by our heroine here. Let her, Beauty, Psyche, and all the other ladies of this tale type show us how important it is to build trust with the people we love. And if we ever break that trust, it's not always easy to regain it. It takes hard work and understanding to make any relationship work, whether it's romantic, platonic, or familial. After that, only time will tell whether we can build that trust again, like our heroine did in East of the Sun and West of the Moon. I hope you all enjoyed this story. If you did, please let me know by using your magic arrow to shoot the like button, and feel free to subscribe for more fairy tales and ring the bell to get notified of my content. Until next time, my friends, may all your dreams come true and fare thee well. Mwah!